Joe. Right, I'll make a start if that's okay. Thank you everyone for coming. Today has been organised by Redditch Astronomical Society. So we'll just have Nick up to say a quick couple of words about the society, and I'll get out of your way.
Well, thank you all for coming out. So we're the Redditch Astronomical Society. We've been around since 2007. We meet the first Tuesday of every month at the Windmill Community Centre. So we do some observing at Morton Stanley Park, and we invite guest speakers to come and talk science. And then we also like to do some regular outreach for the community. So I'd like to thank the library for helping us organise today's event. So we've had Becky Hardy, an illustrator of The Unlikely Astronaut, who's been helping the kids downstairs with some wonderful graphic art. And we have a raffle for her book, which is signed by Becky and a real astronaut. It was a nice touch. And I'd like to thank Chris Beckett for coming down, who was that was our initial idea around this, to look into the literary events that the library's been organising. And if anybody is interested in astronomy, wants to join us, become a member, please contact us, or just look out for these outreach events that we try and do whenever we can. So thank you all very much.
Oh, thank you so much for organising it, honestly. And we're hoping to have more events with the Astronomical Society next year, if possible. We'll do our best. But yeah, thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
By way of introduction, you were first published in 1990, and you've written 9 books. I don't know why I'm addressing this to you rather than to...
Yeah, I know it. Yeah.
Chris has written 9 books and 3 short story collections, and won the Edge Hill Prize for Short Fiction in 2009. And in 2013, won the Arthur C. Clarke Award, which is the highest science fiction award going, for his brilliant novel Dark Eden, which became a trilogy. And you've also worked as a social worker and a lecturer in social work, and has published lots of academic texts on social work as well. So yeah, we'll make a start. Please excuse my idiot sheet; it's just my little. But I just wanted to ask you, how would you describe your own body of work and your own approach to science fiction?
Well, I'm not a very sciencey science fiction writer, not in the sense that I'm not interested in science, but science isn't the main focus of my books. It's more human society that I'm interested in writing about. And I think I'm interested in science fiction because it allows you to have a little experiment about, to think, how would human society work in a slightly different context? Or it could be in the future, or it could be on a different planet, or something like that. And just kind of, I think what scientists call a thought experiment, where you just carry don't really do the experiment, you just do a mental exercise thinking. That's what I like to do, and then try and put real characters and create this world, and then in it try and place real people that I can identify with, and hopefully the reader can identify with, or recognise as people, And so that's my approach, rather than being about, some amazing technology or something like that. That's very much the framework for the story, rather than the story itself of me. Yeah.
And Dark Eden is a great example of that, where you've essentially got a society and a world you've created from scratch. Could you talk a little bit about how Dark Eden started out for you?
Dark Eden was a really long time evolving. It first began in a short story I wrote back in 1992, that long ago. And weird enough, I think the inspiration came from me. At the time, I had one of those Amstrad computers, the old ones with the green letters on the black screen. And so it's like the opposite way around to paper, isn't it? It's like you've got shining letters on a dark background rather than the other way around. And I think that may have been what put the idea in my mind of a planet that had no sun, and the light came from the bioluminescent life forms, trees and so on, the luminous flowers and so on. So I dreamed up the idea of a planet with no sun, and weirdly at the time, I'm talking to lots of astronomers, so you will be surprised I didn't know this, but when I came up with that, I didn't know there was such a thing as a rogue planet, or I think they're called free-floating planets as well, aren't they? I just thought, Well, there probably are, because I mean, you know, stars form from dust and gas in space. Why wouldn't planets form? You know, and so I just went with it. And later on, I found out, oh wow, I was right. They do exist.
Really?
They're thought to be. I think they're now thought to be very common as well, but they're just hard to detect because they don't give out light.
Yeah.
Well, they don't give out. In my case, it does give out light, but not enough to see from a distance. And I kind of worked. You know, I did think about the science a bit, but it's more like what do you call it? Improvised science.
Yeah.
You know? I thought to myself, well, how would it get heat? Well, I thought it could have a hot core, and I thought they could have life forms that use the hot core to bring heat up to the surface, you know, and so on. And
Yeah.
I don't think it would completely work, but it kind of, you know, had sort of a surface plausibility. And then I wanted to. But part of the idea was I wanted to have a story about people who were exiles from Earth. They couldn't go back to Earth.
Yeah.
They would never be able to go back to Earth. And this was very sad for them because they remembered a planet full of light and they live in a dark planet.
Yeah.
And yet the fact that the darkness worked well for the theme of the story as well, because that was about being exiles and having to cope with that as well. So the sciencey bit fitted with the theme bit, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And I called it Dark Eden because of course, the biblical story about Eden is, you know, people are in a paradise and they get expelled from it. And then my idea was it's the other way around. Actually, they get expelled from Earth and now they live in Eden, but Eden is not where they really want to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the planet's called Eden. Yeah. It's beautiful though. It's a beautiful planet. They have luminous trees and it's lovely, but it's always night. You know.
Yeah, I was saying to someone earlier, I would love to see a film adaptation or a TV show because the visuals of it would be stunning.
Very costly to make.
I bet. Yeah.
I feel if it's adapted, it won't look as good as in my mind it is. But you'd be talking about sort of Avatar levels of expense.
Yeah.
In fact, there is a night scene in Avatar. If you've ever seen the film Avatar, which when I saw it, I thought, wow, that is a little bit like Eden. You know, it reminds me of Eden. You know, with the luminous flowers and everything. You know. Yeah,
and James Cameron's a big science fiction geek, and he reads everything. Maybe he
ripped off my idea.
Borrowed it. Yeah.
Weirdly, actually, it's funny you should say that because I actually thought, damn, because people are going to think I ripped it off from this film. Actually, and there's an animal in there which is a sort of black carnivorous animal with 6 legs.
Yeah.
And amazingly, if you read the beginning of Dark Eden, there is a black carnivorous animal with 6 legs.
I reckon he's a fan.
But bastard. Yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant. So the way you approach the writing of it sounds as if you're writing fantasy in the same sort of way where, you know, the traditional way you think of science fiction authors is they research things and then they work their research into ideas, whereas fantasy authors will just sort of start from their own creation and go with it. And it sounds more like...
No, I try and make it, as to say, at least on a superficial level, I try and make it so it feels plausible. I don't write science fiction that just you think, oh, that's just ridiculous. You know?
Yeah.
So I feel like, to me anyway, Eden, probably to those of you who are astronomers, you think, well, that would never work. But to me, it did work. You know.
Yeah.
So I did try and think about the science. Say, no, it's not like fantasy. I wouldn't write fantasy with magic and stuff. I wouldn't do that.
You wanted it to feel as if it.
I wanted it to feel like an authentic part of the world.
Yeah.
You know? And you know, for example, when I was writing about the animals that live in Eden, I tried to. Sometimes science fiction authors just put like a whole random collection of weird animals, and I think no, animals, like animals on Earth, they come in certain types. You know, like most large animals on Earth have got 4 limbs. You know, you don't suddenly get one with 6 limbs, another with 10 limbs. Yeah, usually got. And I tried to be like that. In fact, on Eden, most animals have 6 limbs. You know.
Yeah.
But you know, so I tried to make it feel real. Yeah. So I wouldn't call it fantasy. No.
I was interested. You've said elsewhere that you. There's lots of places on Earth where there's no sunlight and life develops like deep under the ocean.
Yeah.
So there's lots of, you know, reality to the planet, which
in fact, I think quite a lot of people think that life evolved in those around geothermal vents under the ocean.
Yeah.
Where there's no sunlight at all. It's complete heat always comes from geothermal energy, and what's more, you get luminous planets, luminous animals and plants down there as well. You know, so you know.
Along the social line of the book, how did you develop the language that they speak? Because they've got a very specific way of talking.
they Eden people they speak well, this is an Eden person said they speak slow. If they want to emphasize a word, they repeat it, which there's a few other things, little things like that.
Rather than
to make their language
really
sound different.
Yeah.
I never used the word very. I had to train myself because all the stories are told in the first person by people from Eden.
Yeah.
So I had to train myself not to use the word very ever, because they never do that. They always use double words, And it's funny because sometimes I would find myself writing something else, and I think, I mustn't use the word very. I think, no, I'm writing English now. I can write.
You're allowed.
I got sort of trained like that. My idea was about that. First of all, I just wanted it to sound different, because it would sound different. Several hundred years of being separated from Earth, so I just wanted to make it different. But I also thought, you see, everyone in Eden, this is one of the things that aren't scientifically very plausible, are all descended from two people, just like in the Bible story. There's a man and a woman, and everyone on Eden is descended from these two people. They have a lot of genetic problems, by the way, but that's another story. And I thought, so there would have been a period when there'd just be a mum and dad and a bunch of kids. That would be the entire population of Eden. And I don't know, those of you who are parents will know what I mean. When your kids are small, you use more babyish language, don't you? And even when you're talking to your partner, you often still use that baby language. You start saying poo and things like that. And, And I thought to myself, the only thing that stops you permanently switching to childish language is you're also surrounded by adults. And I thought if there was no other adults, perhaps the language would become a bit babyish.
Yeah.
So it's slightly, it's not babyish, but it's simplified.
Yeah.
I don't want to make it so it's irritating to read. So I only made a few small changes. But so I wanted to have a different feel,
It really works. It really gives you the impression of a society separated from ours that is descended from ours.
Yeah. And they that's the idea. Thank you. And I wanted their language to have a slightly different rhythm from us. And also, when they name things, they often name things after things on Earth, but they're not really the same thing. There's creatures on Eden that they call bats, for example. They're not really like what we call bats. There's things called leopards. They're not really like what we call leopards. But I felt like, but they also have to coin new words for things, because, for example, when they first come across a large body of water, they know that they've heard stories where there was something called a sea, and they think, well, we don't know what that stood for, because they assume they're talking about the letter C, and so they have to come up with a new name for that body of water, because they can still sort of write, but they're not very literate, but some of them can still write, But the other thing I wanted to think about was if your whole life is basically about struggling to survive, get enough food to eat, all that sort of thing, which is what they live a kind of Stone Age existence, really, even though they're descended from astronauts. There's only so much knowledge you can pass on to the next generation. So their memories of Earth are very confused. They do know there were things like electricity and aeroplanes and things like that.
Yeah.
They have no clue how they were made.
Yeah.
But they tell stories about this wonderful place where they had licky trickety and as they call it, things like that. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with it, as you can, I enjoyed playing around with it. Yeah. Sorry. Anyway,
do you so did you sort of fully design the world before you started writing the novel, or is it something you explored as you kind of went through the story?
I kind of made it up as I went along, but obviously I had to go back a bit, and but yeah, I did a bit. Yeah. I had to think through some of the bits.
Yeah. So for Dark Eden, the world came first. The idea of this sunless planet.
No, the thing that came first was I don't think I'm giving away too much. There's a fairly crucial scene in Dark Eden where a young man, who's one of the main protagonists and one of the narrators of the story, destroys in the middle of the settlement on Dark Eden. They have a circle of stones. That represents the place where the spaceship first came down to land, and they're hoping that one day somebody from Earth will land in that same spot. And he says it's stupid to keep waiting for Earth to come back. It's obviously they're not coming. It's obvious that we've been here for 150 years. It's obviously they're not coming. And he destroys the circle. And that was the original idea. I wrote a short story about that.
Yeah.
And so it flowed out from that. But the world came second. I wanted to invent,
How do you approach books where so for example, Two Tribes is very different and America City is very different? How do you approach, do you have a different approach when you're creating an entire world for yourself that's completely fictional, rather than playing in a slightly futuristic version of our own world?
Well, Dark Eden, the Eden trilogy is the only book I've written in a... Well, no, actually, there's one other book, but apart from those 4 books, all my books are more like this world, but they're usually either in the future or in one case, in a sort of imaginary past. But I still try and play with language, you know. So like this book here, America City, that's set in America in the future, and I still like to just do something different to the language. So I think in the future the Hispanic population of America will be much bigger than it is now. And so I had the idea that in the future American English will be much more influenced by Spanish than they are now. So even, you know, non-Hispanic people use they'll say CC, or they'll exactamente or things like that. You know, por cierto means I'm not anyone who can speak Spanish or realize I don't know how to pronounce it, but I use Spanish words, and I just like to play with the language. Yeah.
Is language... Sorry.
Not going to, but then when they sort of separated out, they were saying that if somebody from one area started talking to people in a different area, they spoke a slightly different way.
Yeah, on Eden, yeah, they do. Yeah, people in different parts of Eden in the sequels, when even more times passed, the English has started to they've started to develop local dialects. Yeah. So when they hear each other, just say, "That's odd. Why do you talk like that?" You know.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, because that's what happens, isn't it? You know, like, you know, Americans don't sound like English people, and you could imagine that if it wasn't for TV and films and radio and so forth, Americans would sound even more different from us, you know. And they might be well on the way to having a different language by now, but because we have so much communication, that doesn't happen, you know.
It happens in Wales as well. My dad is first language Welsh, and he's from North Wales, and he says he can't understand Valley's Welsh, for example.
I've heard that. In fact, Welsh speakers sometimes have to switch to English to understand each other. Yeah, I've heard that. Doric. Yeah, that's very hard to understand, apparently. Yeah. Yeah, a black country. Yeah. Yeah, they're yeah. Well, it's a lovely thing about English, isn't it? There's so many different versions of it. Yeah.
Local accents.
Yeah, I love it. And I love the fact that England, they change so quickly, don't they? You get off at one station and people are talking away, you go another few, they're talking differently, you know.
Travel across the country, rather than stand something, local accent changes so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They themselves will go, no, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's weird, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, you know, because I live in Cambridge, and you know, you just come. This isn't really very far from here, is it? But you know, you all got that. Most of you here have got that slight, you know, Midlands twang, which you know you never hear that in Cambridge. And and it's nice. It's nice. I like that. Yeah.
Could I ask you to describe, because the premise of Two Tribes is brilliant, and I'd rather you describe it than I try and describe it for you, because obviously you wrote it. But could you describe what Two Tribes is about and how you found the sort of germ for that idea?
Two Tribes is basically about Brexit, actually. It isn't terribly science fictional, this book.
Yeah.
Except that the person telling the story is some centuries in the future. And so they're reconstructing events from the future. And my idea about that was, it got very bitter and heated, didn't it, in this country around the time of Brexit, you know, and I wanted to imagine a future where that people are no longer invested in either side. It's just a history, you know. My analogy for that is a bit like, if you're not from Northern Ireland, that whole dispute between the different communities in Northern Ireland, you know, you don't necessarily understand the passions, do you? Because you're not involved with it, and it's like looking in at that from or if you look back at, say, the English Civil War, you know, you think it's too long ago. We don't. You might be able to decide which side you'd be on, but you know. So I thought to do that. So the narrator's in the future, and I described the world that the narrator's in, but most of the story takes place in 2016, and the main story is actually a love story between a Remain voting architect and a Leave voting who comes from London, and a leave voting hairdresser who comes from Norfolk. And why I thought about it, because I come from Cambridge. I don't know if any of you know Cambridge. Cambridge is a very prosperous city, one of the most prosperous cities in the country. It's also one of the most unequal cities in the country, interestingly. And it was one of the most Remain voting cities in the country. And the other end of the county, Wisbech, is a poor town, and it's one of the most Leave voting cities in the country, towns in the country. And in fact, East Anglia, almost all of East Anglia voted Leave, except for the little island around Cambridge and Norwich. I don't know if you know, Norwich is also quite a prosperous little town. And so I thought, rather than taking sides as a matter of fact, I voted Remain, but rather than taking sides and trying to slag off the other side and all that, why not just look at it as two tribes that had different way of looking at the world, and just try and portray that, rather like I might do with Eden. Just look at it from the outside, and that was my idea of two tribes. There's also a class thing going on as well, because he's a kind of middle class guy, and she's like from a working class background from rural Norfolk. So I think that this couple, they kind of liked each other, but almost constantly kind of misunderstanding each other, because their whole outlook on life was different. So they came from two tribes in more than one sense, and that was my idea of that book. Yeah, I'm very proud of that book, actually. Yeah.
And you've sort of used the science fiction element as a framing device.
A framing device, actually, yeah. So, it's just a framing device. The actual story is set in the present, except that the person in the future, she invents some things. She makes up some scenes which we know aren't real, but to her mind it would fit,
Yeah.
I know it sounds complicated, but that's how it works. But yeah, so that's you can think about science fiction. Nearly all my books are kind of science fiction, but there's so many different. The way I see it is, science fiction is like a pack of cards. You can play lots of different games with it,
Yeah.
And so it's a very different game from the Eden game, it's such fun, just playing out with it.
You've got a fascinating pitch on your blog, which is brilliant. A pitch to non-science fiction readers about why they should give science fiction a go and what is possible in science fiction. Could you sort of briefly, just not to ask you to repeat yourself, but what is your pitch for science fiction?
Well, I know lots of people who don't read science fiction, including my dear sister who's sitting here, and my wife, and I know why they don't want to read science fiction, because they think it's all going to be exploding rocket ships and robots.
Macho men with plasma guns and that sort of thing.
Yeah. But there's a lot of science fiction that would confirm your prejudices. I'm not I won't lie. But I think my pitch is there's so much more to it than that. If you read any kind of fiction, any kind of serious fiction at all, you're invested in the idea that you can make stuff up in order to make a point. You make up characters, you make up situations. All fiction does that.
Yeah.
And the only thing that science fiction does differently, in theory anyway, is that it also makes up a set world. That's the only thing that's different. And that allows me to do different kinds of experiments. And that's why I think it's good. And if any of you hate science fiction, I'm afraid a lot of it would be exactly what you think it's going to be, and you won't like it. But, give my stuff a chance, give a few other people's stuff a chance. It is more varied than you might think. That's what I'm saying.
We have an issue with catalogue in the library, because books arrive already tagged with the genre that they're in. And there's lots of books will arrive marked as general fiction or literary fiction. And I get a bit uppity about it as a sci-fi and horror fan. Lots of books that have science fiction elements will be marketed as literary fiction, because they're from authors who haven't been tagged science fiction authors, if you know what I mean.
That does bug me as well. Like if
Margaret Atwood or
Kazuo Ishiguro write a science fiction novel that gets general fiction and this is literature. Yeah. If I write a book, it might be just as full of ideas and so on as theirs is. It'll be in the science fiction shelves, and it's a challenge, because in a way my stuff is often not science fictionally enough for the real science fiction buffs, but it's
like Two Tribes is set largely in the present day,
and largely in the present, so
I'm constantly running around rebadging them, reclaiming Kazuo Ishiguro for science fiction.
Yeah, well, Kazuo Shigure is very gracious about it, actually. But what's his name? Ian McEwan wrote that book. Is it called Machines Like Us? About
Oh,
robots?
right, yeah.
And I saw an interview and he said, well, of course, it's not science fiction because science fiction is all about robots and ray guns. And I thought, well, first of all, it is about a robot. And secondly, what a nasty thing to say. I mean, you know, he nicks an idea that comes from our science fictional world, and then he's not got the grace to acknowledge it. Yeah. I mean, actually, it is quite a funny book, actually. So I have to say, I quite enjoyed it, but you know, still a bit snotty, I thought.
Yeah, I see it all the time when Oscar-winning actors take part in a psychological thriller, and they wouldn't dare call it a horror film. It's like, what you've done there is a horror film. You just want an award, and they don't give them to horror films.
Well, it's funny. Yeah, sure is a funny thing.
Do you see science fiction as having a role in sort of broader culture, in the way of like, you've obviously written lots of academic articles and textbooks, where you give students and social workers room to think about the theory of their practice. Do you think science fiction can do that for popular and broader culture in moments of crisis? Like we've got, you know, lots of tensions going on at the moment with the political situation. Do you see science fiction as having a role in that?
I think I'd like to think the kind of science fiction I write and other people like me write is supposed to help people think about things like politics in a slightly broader way. Like this Brexit book, for example. Let's step back from this. Let's step back from all the Yahoo stuff and think about, whichever side you're on, the other side aren't deliberately trying to be nasty. They actually do think differently from you. Let's just step back and look at that. So I think it's important for that. The other thing I'd say about science fiction and culture is that science fiction kind of came into being in the 19th century. You can think of, there are earlier examples of things you could call science, going right back to classical times, But really, science fiction as a genre took off in the 19th century. And I don't think that's a coincidence, because in the 19th century, technology started to really take off. And so that meant that, if you lived in the Middle Ages, the world your parents lived in was the same world that you lived in. But like, even just in my lifetime, there was no such thing as mobile phones, the internet, etc., when I was a kid. We are living in a world that changes very, very rapidly. And so I think science fiction is a kind of literature that deals with that. It deals with the fact that the world changes. And that's part of life. The actual setting changes, and not just it's not just life. It's not just a fixed setting and events happen in front of it. It's actually changing in itself,
And language is such a massive part of that. And
language is
so
part
much
of that,
of it comes from science fiction, like George Orwell and that sort of
exactly.
thing.
Oh yeah, George Orwell. That whole thing about, I still quote George Orwell's 1984 because he really nailed it with the way language gets distorted and turned upside down and so on. Totally.
Is it quite tricky to be to write science fiction set slightly in the future when things are so chaotic at the moment? Do you find yourself halfway through a project and then reality catches up?
Absolutely. That did happen with this book, America's City, because I had this idea of this maverick American president that was going to start in the future, at a time of global warming. There are a lot of tensions inside America, and he was going to start threatening his neighbours, Canada and Greenland particularly. And it's starting to become true,
Trump, true.
Trump, it's starting to become Trump. And when I was writing it, in fact, I was writing about this guy. I actually wrote the first, for the record, I wrote the first version of the story in 2012. And was it 2016 that Trump got elected? Yes, it was, wasn't it? Yeah, first time around. 2016, I was writing a book. And it was like you're driving along the road and you're looking in a rear view mirror, and reality was catching up with me. It's like, because I was writing about the way social media is being manipulated and so on.
But that's great though. That's how you get yourself marked as a visionary science fiction
exactly
writer.
Exactly. although when future takes over, people are like, well, that's old hat now. It didn't happen exactly like that. Pardon?
Going back to Thomas Surrey world living, back to the 19th century, I was going to mention H.G. Wells.
Yeah.
And you've got the machines with attention.
So just come just.
19, I know I've talked
No, yeah.
It's not that. It's just that there's this air blowing
The
away.
aircon here is very loud.
So,
Sorry.
Yeah. So just speak up a bit. Yeah.
I thought in there because new inventions.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. He was a visionary writer, and
Yeah.
Putting back into some kind of other reality that we're actually living now because it gets a bit.
yeah. No time machines yet, though. Yeah.
And did he sort of do a similar thing? I'm a Philistine. I've only seen the movie of the Time Machine, where at the end he's imagined how people in the future will have evolved into these. What were the creatures called in that?
What are they called? Morlocks. That's right.
Morlocks,
Yeah. Morlocks, and those are the Morlocks of the sort of underclass who live underground, aren't they? And then there's this sort of aristocratic class. Yeah. And that's about social class. I mean, I'm interested in social class. Actually, it's interesting to write about. Yeah,
that's one of the interesting things about science fiction is you have writers who will take a technology and their books will be more about the technology, whereas yours are more about societal change and as you say, language. And there's so many different varieties of science fiction.
I suppose you could say mine is more like social science fiction.
Yeah.
But
Has that been influenced by your career as a social worker and your work as a lecturer and academic? Do you think, in terms of?
Yeah, I was a social worker. I think being a social worker does make you, because my sister and I come from a fairly sort of well-to-do middle-class background,
Yeah.
But being a social worker certainly exposed me to
I bet,
a different side of life, which I kind of a bit of an eye-opener really to realise.
Are you sort of seeing how people are affected by things like changes in government policies more than
I suppose you are as a
people who
social
don't
worker, but you
work
just
in
see how grim life is for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, not saying it's all roses for anybody, but you don't have to deal with poverty. We didn't have to deal with poverty, but I think also, for some reason, and my sister's the same, we have to identify with the underdog a bit in life, for whatever reason. So that explains why I went into social work, but also why those kind of themes come into my books.
Do you think having written academically as well influences the style of your writing? Because with academic writing, obviously, every sentence has got to serve a function. You've got to be very economical and.
Well, I enjoy academic writing almost as much as I enjoy other kinds of writing, but it probably has a negative influence on my fiction writing in a way, because academic writing is more formal.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you're writing fiction, you want to, you can use whatever language you like. You don't have to use formal language. You can make up your own language, or you can write in dialect or whatever. So I have to try and avoid using pompous academic type language when I'm writing fiction. Yeah.
Is it a nice break to write fiction as opposed to academic writing? You get to exercise different muscles.
Fiction is my first love, definitely. It's all, the other part of my life has always been the day job, as far as I'm concerned. But, I've tried to do it properly, but
But you think writing fiction is not really escapism. Writing fiction is switch off from your day job and lose yourself when you're writing.
Well, I don't think that's any more true of writing fiction than any other kind of writing.
No, that's true. Writing in general.
Writing in general is a way of switching off from the day-to-day life. But I try and write fiction that makes people reflect about the real world and not doesn't just provide an escape from the real world. That's what I try and do. Yeah.
So do you see a benefit to writing in terms of just without any idea of publication or sharing it, just writing as an act in itself?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I like people reading my stuff. It's a bit like, I'd say the same thing. I wouldn't sit in a room talking with no one listening.
Right.
And it's like that. It's not. I was saying to somebody earlier on. I'm not saying I'm not free of vanity or anything, but it's not just about vanity. It's about just I want to say something and I want people to hear what I want to say. That's important to me.
Yeah.
And so if people. Sometimes people write to me and say, I've read Two Tribes and it made me think about myself. I think, lovely, that's nice. They've connected with what I wanted to say,
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I was going to ask. I don't want to ask you where you get your ideas from, sort of thing. But I'm fascinated with what you do when you get the first spark of an idea.
Yeah.
How do you build that out into a story? And do you often not know what it's going to be when it starts out? Because obviously you've written a lot of short fiction as well.
Yeah.
How do you say you've got a spark? Where do you go with that?
The really frustrating thing about that is it's different every time, so you never know where it's going to come from. I mean, you can't make it happen. You know?
Yeah.
So, it doesn't matter how hard you try, you can't make it happen. You have to just let it happen. And then sometimes you get one spark and you think, oh no, that's not enough. And then you get, I've got two separate sparks. That will work. You need to have several, I think, to really get things going. It's very difficult to explain. Say this book here, it's my most recent novel. I had no idea what I was going to write at all. I said to my wife one evening, I said to her, I've been messing around for too long. Tomorrow I'm going to start writing a novel. And she said, that would actually be a really good first line. And bless her, that's exactly what I did. This novel starts. Tomorrow I'm going to begin my novel. And I had no idea what I was going to write at all. And I wrote a whole novel in about 6 weeks. That was the first draft, don't get me wrong. It took me a lot longer than that. And I thought, wow, I've really cracked it. I really know how to write a book now. I just sit down and write. It's never worked since then. I've had a really dry period since then. It never worked before, but it's like every time is different. Like the Dark Eden one, came from a certain place, and the Brexit one came from another place, and America, so you can never tell, and it's frustrating because, well, like academic writing, you think I'm going to write a book about this, and you research that, and then you don't just dry up, Whereas in fiction, it's a mysterious alchemy which you can't consciously control.
It's quite inspiring that's the case, because if you sat there and said, this is exactly how I do it every time, and it's always the same every time, it would make a lot of writers feel like a bit of a failure. It's nice that there's a lot of variety in how people
I've had a really long dry period recently, and it's like you go for long periods and you just can't write anything, and suddenly you go, get it, and then off it goes, and but it's like it's lovely when it works. It is a lovely thing. You feel like you're being able to do magic, it's a nice feeling.
Do you have strategies do you sort of get writer's block, or is it more just sort of you don't?
I get blocked while I'm writing things,
right?
And but
do you have sort of strategies you use to get out of it, or is it just sort of
different
up to the muse kind of thing?
Different each time, I can't tell you that. Not one particular strategy, but I suppose the only thing is because I have written quite a few books and stories, there's part of me that thinks I know it can be overcome. That's the thing that's different.
Yeah.
I have a friend who wrote many years ago wrote a really brilliant book which won prizes and everything. She's never been able to write anything since, and I feel so sorry for her, but because she hasn't had the experience of overcoming that.
Yeah.
I feel like if she overcame it once, she'd understand how to do it. But I can't tell her.
Could I ask about your writing process? Do you tend to plot in advance your stories, or do you discover them as you go, generally? Or is it different per book?
I discover that I make them up as I go along. It's that I've got a rough idea where they probably will end up.
Yeah.
And the characters come alive as I go along, and it's a bit of a cliche, but your characters do sort of, once they come alive, you think, well, they wouldn't do that. They do this, and they almost become like people that you. I was putting it too strong to say they come alive in this, but you kind of think, oh, I get it. They do this, So you've got to let the thing evolve.
How rough are your first drafts, if you don't mind me asking? Do you have to go back and do a lot of rewrites and editing, or are you pretty much?
Well, I rewrite as I go along.
Oh, okay.
Over and over and over as I go along. So you may notice that some of my books, they look a bit more polished at the beginning than the end because they've been over like a million times. The first part, the end part hasn't been over so many times. But you've just got through loads of drafts, nowadays with word processors, you don't really have drafts in the same sense because you can just revise as you go along, so it's not quite like drafts.
Right, you don't have to sit down and type the whole thing out.
You must go through dozens of drafts.
How do you know when a book is finished?
I just think, I've had enough. You know?
Fair enough.
It's never finished. I look at one of those things like, oh, how could I put that? I should have put something different. You know. Yeah.
Just has a note at the end saying, you make up the rest.
Yeah, you make up the rest. Yeah, sorry, I'm bored. Yeah, no, I do finish it. It's just a matter of revisions, but yeah, that would be funny, wouldn't it? Yeah, you get the general gist. yeah.
Is the Dark Eden trilogy finished in that sense? Or do you ever get the urge to go back? Carry on.
That trilogy is finished. If you read the trilogy, you'll realise that it comes to quite a nice ending.
It comes to a nice ending.
Which takes you
As a reader, you do want to know.
kind of, but as a reader, you want to know the next time. I have actually this year written not a novel, but a longish short story which is set after the novels. Which I'll say no more than that. So if I say any more, it'll involve a spoiler.
Is it available?
Pardon?
Is it available?
Well, I hope to get it published in a science fiction magazine, and then probably at some point I'll publish a collection of stories, and it'll be in that. But I'm not going to say any more about that. But I enjoyed writing it very much, and it was nice to revisit the, in a way, to revisit the Eden world. Yeah. And write about an Eden person. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Did you find it difficult to get published?
Oh yeah, very difficult. Yeah. The one thing in the science fiction world is good, as compared to general fiction. I hate that phrase. Yeah, is that there are quite a lot of magazines that publish short stories, so you get a little bit of a stepping stone, because you can build a bit of a reputation by selling short stories to magazines that pay you peanuts, but but my big break came as there's also in science fiction there's a number of small presses which are like tiny publishing companies that are run really almost as a hobby by someone or other. And I put together a collection of short stories for a publishing press called Elastic Press, which is quite literally one guy who at the time worked in a call center in Norwich. He set up his own publishing company. He published this book. He entered it for a prize, and it won the prize. And that was then I could start going to commercial publishing companies. Without that step up, I don't know what I would have done. So I'm very grateful to that guy, whose name is Andrew, and he eventually gave up the publishing company because he wanted to do more of his own writing. But yeah, there's in that world there's quite a lot of these kind of small enthusiasts, that set things up, and that's a really nice thing in that particular world.
Then you had a lot published with Interzone and Asimov's to start with.
Is it still going, Interzone?
Yeah, it's still going. I think they're on not Patreon, like subscriber supported sort of model.
Yeah. Interzone was the major English British science fiction magazine at the time, and Asimov's is one of the American magazines, and I was able to sell stories to them after a while. Those two magazines, really. Yeah.
One of the things I run our writers group here, and one of the things I'm always badgering authors about is how to get published and that sort of thing. But you've got some fantastic advice that I heard you speak about on a podcast recently, which was stop being so obsessed with how to get published and first focus on how to be a better writer. Would you recommend short stories as a good way to experiment with your style and your voice?
Definitely. Short stories are a great way to start because it's a manageable length, and you can produce a nice finished thing, in a reasonable time scale. It's difficult to make the transition from short stories to novels, but I will say this: writing 80,000 words of short stories is in a way a bigger task than writing an 80,000 word novel, because each one's got to be different. Whereas a novel, you think, okay, I've got it now, and you can run with that idea. So in a way, short stories are harder, but there is another sense in which they're easier.
Were there things you did to try and improve your own writing? Were you studying other authors or reading different kinds of fiction?
I'm always influenced by whichever writer I've read recently that I admire. Yes, obviously, study the work of other writers. But
were there any writers who you particularly admired in science fiction when you first started out?
My favourite science fiction writer is Philip K. Dick. There's quite a number of science fiction novels I really admire, and Doris Lessing, for example, actually, and James Tiptree. Is anyone familiar with James? It was actually a woman called Alice Sheldon. There's a whole story about that, but that's another thing. Yeah, there's various role models. Yeah.
Did you find it tricky when you first started writing fiction to find your own voice? Were you?
Yeah, that's the hard thing, and also not only to find your own voice as a writer, but each book needs a separate voice. You need a new voice for each book, and that's the soul of a book, is it the voice you tell it in. And often you have an idea and it just doesn't work, and you think, I'm telling it in the wrong voice, and you change it, and then that's it.
Yeah, because all of your books are very different.
Sometimes often they're told as a first-person narrative by one of the characters.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they're told in the third-person narrative by just a narrator that's outside the story.
Yeah.
And each time it's a different thing.
Do you have any advice for writing short stories in terms of how to create a good one? What kind of structures you would use, or if it needs to be as structured as all that? 'Cause there's lots of conflicting advice, about how to hook people in and how to make people care within the short space of time that you've got them for a short story versus novel. I suppose in a novel you've got, a couple of weeks to grab someone and make them care about your main character, whereas a short story you've maybe got 1-2 sessions. Do you have a
well, I suppose short stories, they are short, but they should be very rich.
Oh, okay.
I think there should be lots to think about in the story.
Yeah.
And so don't just start a short story with one idea. Have several ideas, that will mesh together and make a short story.
Yeah.
Because you don't want it just to be a one-trick pony. You want to be a number of things going on. That's what makes it come alive, I think. But I can't. That's a bit. That sounds like advice, but it's so it's difficult to.
Is that
explain.
a big part of writing where it's hard to give a set of guidelines for people because it's so different for everyone?
It is difficult to, and even to myself, like I'm trying to say, it's even to myself it's hard. If I try and start a new book, I can't tell myself how to do it.
Yeah.
So it's hard enough telling myself how to do it, so how to explain to other people how to do it, I don't know. Yeah.
That scuppers my next question.
Yeah,
I was going to ask you how you go about balancing your story with your sort of thematic concerns and that kind of thing, where you've with the politics of it, it's tricky, I imagine, to write in such a way without it feeling like an essay or.
Well, I think some of my books possibly there's a little bit too much of people discussing ideas with each other. That's something I try to avoid, but occasionally they do. There's a bit of a fault in a lot of science fiction. Science fiction is very much literature about ideas.
Yeah.
So people sometimes have said about my books, characters seem to spend a lot of time debating things, but but that's a flaw. You need to try and avoid that. You need to make it integral to the story in some way.
Is that how you would define science fiction then, as a genre about ideas more than anything else?
Well, it can be that, or it can be escapist fiction. There's lots of things it can be. It's like not all science fiction is very profound.
Yeah.
So.
How do you view the genre at the moment in terms of what's going on right now? Are there any writers working currently who you admire?
Do you know? This is going to sound very weird. I don't read very much science fiction anymore.
Oh, right.
I actually don't read all that much fiction anymore. But I do. Most of the fiction I read nowadays is not science fiction. It's just fiction. And I don't know why that is, but so it's quite a long time since I read a science fiction novel that really blew my socks off.
Yeah.
And most of my science fiction writers I admire come from some time ago. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So not knocking out new work anymore.
Yeah. I don't know why that should be. Perhaps it's just me getting old. Most of the music I listen to is quite old as well.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. I'm still stuck in the 90s.
I think everyone's stuck in their music tastes tend to be stuck about when they stop listening to new stuff when they're about 20.
Yeah.
Well, you still do, but not so much. Yeah.
So just last question, and then we'll open it up for questions from everybody else. I was just going to ask if you had any advice for someone who wanted to have a go at becoming a published writer, what would you say the most important couple of steps are in terms of?
Well, you've already said one of my bits of advice, which is don't obsess about getting published.
Yeah.
Some people,
Improve your work.
sometimes I talk to people and it seems like all they really want to do is to see their name on the front cover of a book. That's not really the point of the exercise. If you want, you won't succeed that way. You've got to actually want to write. It's like, it's like if you want to be a famous pianist, you have to you have to practice the piano. You can't expect to be a famous pianist without practicing the piano. That's the same principle. I think sometimes people don't see that because, ostensibly writing is doing something we can all do. Not like playing the piano. It's something, but it's not like that. Writing fiction is difficult.
Would you recommend going the traditional publishing route in that case, in terms of at least then you've got someone like an agent or an editor or someone who will tell you, yes, this is ready, rather than you making the decision yourself and self-publishing it before you might not be ready?
Self-publishing is difficult because it's difficult to get an audience with self-publishing. And it's difficult to get taken seriously. I know there are cases of people who've done very successfully in self-publishing. But I say this in the science fiction world, science fiction and fantasy, and I think in some other branches, there is a sort of whole ecosystem of small presses and things like that, and magazines and things which do provide a useful stepping stone. So if you are in that kind of world, I recommend. The other thing I always recommend to writers is network.
Right.
Now in science fiction, again, there are science fiction conventions. Now, I won't lie, they're not entirely my cup of tea, but I started going there to these conventions. I made a lot of good friends, other writers. And I met my agent through those things. And I met this guy, Andrew, I was telling you about, who published my short story collection. I got chatting to him. He said, I'd be interested in doing this. If I hadn't met those people, I don't know where I would have been. So network. And I think the thing is that a lot of writers are people who are actually quite like being on their own and actually not terribly, party animals, and so you have to make yourself, my son he writes beautiful songs and he doesn't know what to do with it, go with them. I give him the same advice: network, meet other people,
and if you do it in person, it's a lot more effective, I imagine, because on the internet everyone's shouting at each other about what they're trying to promote.
You get to know people, and you meet other writers, and they probably no more successful than you, but they know people, and they know people, and they introduce you to people, and it's just like any other job. It's about networking, and whether you like it or not, you have to do it. I don't go to science fiction conventions very much anymore, but I used to go regularly, and it was very useful, and I've made a number of good friends that way as well.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. Does anybody have any questions at all for Chris?
So in the Dark Eden series, did you sort of realise when you were thinking about this, that it felt that sort of slightly religious theme to it? It felt like there was a religious theme.
I'm not a religious person, that's straight up. But I've always liked the Eden story, the actual Garden of Eden story. I've always liked that story, and great science fiction story. Yeah, it is in a way. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. But it always struck me that the story, like Adam and Eve are in the garden. It's a beautiful place, and then they get evicted from it, and that even predates the Bible. That story it goes back even before the Bible, and it is actually a very profound story. It's about that human sense we all have of yearning for something else, something beyond what we've got, and you can imagine poor Adam and Eve outside the gates of Eden thinking, oh God, what have we given up? What have we lost? And life can feel like that sometimes, can't it? It can feel like, where is this place I want to be? I can't get to it, And
they sort of worship them later on, especially yellows. They sort of worship them.
Oh yeah. See that aspect, yeah. So you're not talking about the religious.
It's just
but yeah, sure. In the trilogy, you see people beginning to develop religions, two religions actually, which are centered on their ancestors. The Eve figure in Eden is called Angelo. They call her Jella, and they call her the Mother of Eden. She's literally the mother of everyone on Eden. and she's remembered as a special person. The father of all of them is called Tommy. It was his fault they were stranded on Eden in the first place, so he hasn't. So it's the opposite way around for God, because in the Bible it's Eve. It's all Eve's fault, isn't it? Or yeah, but and so they remember these people and they're gradually mythologizing them. But one of the things I thought about is in the Bible, you get these stories. Oh, I'm trying to think of an example. You know, Jacob and Esau. I don't know. People I'm brought up with I was probably people my generation are brought up with Bible stories at school. One brother forces the other one to give up his birthright in exchange for a mess of pottage, and these little domestic stories have suddenly grown to become huge legends. And I played with that idea in the Eden story as well. So one of the stories that is told centuries later in Eden is called the Big Row, which is a huge argument between Tom and Jella, the mum and dad. Because when you're a kid, your mum and dad have a row, it's quite frightening, quite disturbing. And my idea was that story has become such a big story. Mum and dad are around, it's become a story that's passed on for generations, that kind of thing, That's the way that little things like a little seed grows into a whole mythology, I wanted to play around with that. And they use these stories to explain, just like the Bible stories, people used to explain their situation, what you have to read the book. It's about how they use these stories to make sense of their world. And that's what interests me particularly. All my books have people use stories to make sense of their world,
You hear a lot of that in folklore, don't you, with things like the idea of a werewolf being made up to explain horrific murders that they can't imagine a human being being capable of.
Exactly, all that sort of thing. And folklore is full of these things, and things like Sleeping Beauty and all these stories. There's all kinds of weird symbolism going on there when you actually think about it. It's not just a story; it's about something psychological. And
it's interesting that we've lost a lot of the. If you look at paintings and things, there are things in paintings from hundreds of years ago that have symbolic meaning that we don't have access to anymore.
We don't understand it, no. But at the time, it would have been obvious what it was referring to. We've just a rich store of. So even these stories that aren't strictly true, they are true because they contain something psychologically important. That's why I like the Eden story. It's obviously not true. Well, some people believe it's true, but I do not. But I think it contains psychological truths. Yeah. Can you repeat that again, Randy? Say it again. Yes, I love that. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Not directly, but I have read it and I loved it when I read it. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. That's an interesting. You know what? I think it was Blake said about Paradise Lost that Milton was of the devil's party without knowing it, because actually the most vivid and exciting characters are the bad guys, aren't they? Yeah. Which is often the case, isn't it? Bad guys are more fun in many ways. Which is interesting. Yeah.
Is AI getting in the way of science fiction? Does it think it can do it better?
I'm sure I will as well. I do feel I'm getting old now because of this AI thing. I just can't get my head around it anymore, and it actually quite disturbs me. I don't really know how to relate to it, but I think about my grandkids growing up in a world where they can talk to machines. I said to my oldest granddaughter, I think she was about 4 at the time, I said, "Oh, Afra, can you just go and fetch me such and such?" She said, "I'm sorry, I'm not understanding very well at the moment. Please try again later." It's like, which is, if any of you own an Alexa, you'll know that's exactly what they do. I know. Yeah,
it's interesting that
you start talking to AI.
Yeah. I think I have got some AIs in my books, but I'm not very comfortable with them. I can't quite get my head around it. But
it's interesting that all the AI stuff is designed by billionaires with questionable morals who do Nazi salutes at.
I know all that's just happening because
it's
we've got instincts built into us by evolution, but AIs, they have imperatives built into them by their creators. that's their equivalent, really.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's not encouraging when you think about the people who are actually building
absolutely.
them.
Yeah.
But there has been a case recently of someone claiming that AIs suffer, isn't there?
Oh, really?
Yeah. As an AI claiming that it suffers, and it's very weird, Well, how could it suffer, But then again, how do we suffer? I mean, you think about it, we're just chemistry, We're just, and yet we feel, So who knows? That's the thing. I did write, but actually my first novel was about a machine that becomes sentient, So I've been there.
Yeah.
The Holy Machine, it was called, the novel. Yeah, but strange stuff.
You mentioned that you started City in sort of 2012.
Yeah.
So does that mean that you've got more than one book, world and voice going on in your head at the same time?
Yeah, well, actually, what happened is in 2012, I wrote a short story, which was, in essence, the story of America City. And I sent it to a magazine, Astronomical, and they said, it doesn't really work for us. And I thought, I know why it doesn't work for us, because it's not really a short story. It's more of a, a précis of a novel. So I put it on one side, because I had other projects going on.
You surely can't have all of
No, but I think I'd written 2 of the Eden novels, and I just started to write America City then, and I thought, actually, no, I've got one more Eden novel to write. So I put it on one side again, and then I wrote it after that, yeah. It can actually be read as a prequel to the Eden novels as well. I wrote this, so that not a lot of people know that. Right, yeah. Yeah.
Did you say less is more when you write?
Did you say what, sorry?
When you've got like a message in mind that you want to
tell. Yeah.
But if you say less is more to make the message more powerful.
Less is more, yeah, definitely. Yeah, you don't want to be preachy. And also, I don't really say I ever try and have a message. I don't want to tell people, you should think this, you should think that. I just want to say, look, here's something I find interesting, Look at it. That's more that I want to do, rather than you should vote Labour or something like that, whatever it might be. So this America City is about climate change, but I'm not preaching people about climate change. I'm just saying, I think that when climate change really kicks in, we have a big migration problem. Large numbers of people are going to be moving from one part to another part, and the other people on the other end are not going to like it, as they already don't. And what's the implications of that going to be? I'm not saying you should do this or you should do that. I'm just saying this is what I see as how the dynamics of it's going to work. What I decided to do in America City is, rather than present a global situation, I tried to imagine that there was a big migration problem within America. So the people in the southern states are moving north, and the people in the northern states are starting to say, we don't want these people moving up into the north.
I like the Guardian comment, timely and urgent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have you ever met anyone who's taken your work and found meanings in it that you didn't intend, but taken it in a different way than maybe you would?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. First of all, it used to annoy me. I didn't mean that, and I think later I thought, well, so that's fine. They find what they like. That's fine. Yeah. So it's almost the opposite way. Yeah.
About America, really, the indigenous people of the country are now, I call it silent apartheid, because the way they're treated, they are just.
You're talking about Native Americans? Yeah.
It's their country at the end of the day. It's the Maori say, hold on, this is, you come here.
Yeah.
And we are the people that lived here originally. So we take control. And I really admire them for that. Yeah.
Although 2 million Native Americans taking control of 300 million people, but it wouldn't really happen. But I mean, this is what I'm interested in, actually, what America's rather obvious threats to take over Greenland, because that is one of the few. Well, it's the only country in the Americas that's actually currently. I know it's part of Denmark, but it's got home rule.
Yeah.
And the people who run it are Inuits, and I bet if they were taken over by America, in no time at all, the Inuits would be a minority, and white Americans would be the dominant. So.
I think a lot of them are a bit outraged and wearing the t-shirts saying, why does it you can buy us?
I know, outrageous, outrageous. You can just buy, but of course, a lot of quite quite a lot of America was bought. Alaska was bought from Russia. Louisiana was bought from France. You know, and other parts were conquered, of course. So yeah.
Same with Australia, really.
Yeah, gosh, yeah.
Treated us again.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. I'll tell you the weird thing about Australia. I think, because I went a few years ago when I went there. My sister lives there. You arrive in some little town and it's got an Aboriginal name. You know.
Yeah.
You know, it might be called.
Large from certain places, parts of the, wherever they go, you can't.
You arrive in this town, it's got an Aboriginal name. You don't see any Aboriginals at all. And you think it's like they've arrived there and say, excuse me, mate, what do you call this place? Oh, fine, okay, now you can sort off, you know. Now we know what it's called. It's like that, you know. But yeah.
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 You know, when you're publishing,
Yeah.
and then you become successful in one particular, say the publishing houses don't give you much flexibility to experiment in other genres.
I'm afraid that is the case. And I mean, I think that wasn't the case. I might have branched out a bit more into, for want of a better word, realist fiction, you know, just fiction set in the present of America. Sorry, this one was the nearest thing to that. I gave it a science fictional frame, you know, so my science fiction readers wouldn't feel like but it would be fun to, if you could just write what in any genre you like, but your publishers don't want you to do that. They want you to stay in your lane, you know. Yeah, I'm not bored of it, but it's just be fun to do different things, you know, and it's a shame. But I think it's partly readers as well, because readers don't stay with you. Like, you know, this book here, this one here isn't really science fiction and hasn't sold very well, you know. And it's like people don't want to follow you into a different place, you know. Which is a shame, but that's how it is. I mean, you know, in a way I get it. If I read an author and I really like them, you kind of want more of the same, don't you? Yeah. I'm a hypocrite, really, because as a reader I'm the same. But as a writer, it kind of bugs me, you know. People,
Actors, though, isn't it? So
it's typecast. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You wouldn't want to watch William Shatner and something else because he's James T. Kirk.
Yeah.
It does happen, and you know, you hear of it. I don't want to keep them. I'll get stuck to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Are you disciplined? Do you think 9 o'clock Monday morning?
Well, if I have a day, if I've set aside a writing day, I just knuckle down and do it. Yeah. But lately, I haven't seemed to have all that many writing days, but that's to do with other commitments. But yeah, I do. I settle down. In fact, one thing I find, those of you who do a bit of writing, I actually nowadays I like to take my laptop and go and work somewhere else from my home, so it feels like going to work, you know. And also, I like to work in an environment where there's other people around me, like a cafe or something, because I enjoy the buzz of it. Library's a bit quiet, you know, but yeah, library's not bad. Yeah. But I like to have people around me. Yeah.
Come in on a Tuesday morning, you'll have me singing nursery rhymes downstairs.
Okay.
It's not too
Yeah,
quiet.
that would be nice. Yeah, I'd enjoy that. Yeah. I've tried. Yeah.
We've got, obviously, we were talking earlier about covers and everything.
Yeah.
We've got an illustrator, Beckett, here today.
All right. Hello. Oh, yeah.
This morning and everything else.
Yeah.
How much do you get involved in what covers?
Well,
on your books?
all these covers you can see on the screen here are all done by the same guy, which I think I really like those covers.
They're
Bless him,
incredible,
he
yeah.
always reads the book from cover to cover before he designs the cover, and I get sent the design. And if I don't know if this is your experience as well, but if I say I don't particularly like that, I wouldn't dare to say to him that's complete rubbish. I don't want you to do something completely different. But I would say, could you perhaps change that? He always does, you know. I've never actually met him. It's weird because I'd like to, but apparently he's rather shy. He doesn't show that sharp for the publishers' parties, but it's cool. But yeah, so the cover of this one, it was a bit different when he first did it, and I said, "Can you change that?" And he did, you know. But isn't that lovely, though, isn't it? Look at that.
So we talked earlier to say, because again, when they publish over here, you get one cover, and they publish in the States.
Different, yeah.
I was just wondering, do you get involved in both, or do you?
Not really the American covers. I mean, but no,
do they sort of-
do their own thing. Yeah. But and I've even had Darkene's even been published in Russia as well. But the Russian cover looks completely, you know, it looks more like sort of 60s Pulp Fiction sort of cover. It's completely different. But I think it is important, because I find when I read a book, the cover, and this is saying to you really, Beckett, the cover is actually important to how you see the book. The whole book is coloured by what the cover looks like, I think, and therefore, you don't really want it to be a cover you don't like. But at the same time, you've got to accept that some people understand more than you about graphics and imagery, and so when I first saw this, I thought, well, it doesn't entirely fit with the book, and now I love it. So even my own view has changed. I just got used to that. I really love that cover.
Do you generally get to keep your own titles? You hear about authors who are asked to change their titles for publication, and that's because all of your books have got brilliant titles.
This one here.
I'm a big fan of a good title, and these are all catchy, evocative, and cool. Beneath the World of Sea is a brilliant title.
Actually, that was one that was a negotiation between me and my
really?
I was going to call it Beneath the World, and I had various different titles I had, and we settled on that. It was the title I suggested, but it was a kind of negotiation process. Yeah. Originally, I was going to call it Submundo, which is Beneath the World in Portuguese, but she said that's too obscure.
Right.
But because the world it's set in, they speak Portuguese. But
you have to bear in mind things like people won't be able to Google it properly.
Yeah.
We'll spell it.
I thought it was kind of, Submundo sounds like it means beneath the world, doesn't it? But anyway, anyway, we settled on that, and it's a nice title. Yeah, I'm glad you like it. Yeah,
all of them. Yeah, America City's a great.
America City. Oh God, we had endless arguments about that.
Oh really?
Yeah, that was like title number 10 or something.
But you're at least involved.
I had a really good title for that. It was going to be one of my titles was The Medicine Line, and she said that was way too obscure. But do you know the Medicine Line? You know the border between Canada and the United States. A lot of it's just a straight line, and Native Americans were really puzzled because they'd be being pursued by American cavalry. And then for no reason that was obvious to the Native Americans, they'd stop at a certain place and not go any further. And so the American Indians called it the medicine line, as in, medicine in magic, the magical line goes across a country beyond which, for some reason, white people don't go. And I thought that was such a lovely idea. And the book does deal with the border. So, but anyway, my editor said, there's no way anyone's going to get that reference. Yeah. She was right, I'm not saying she was wrong. Yeah.
Is anyone else?
You probably would want more, really, but if you had the choice of putting one into a film, what would you think?
Wait, one of these things into a film. Dark Eden, but I need massive multi-million-pound budget for that, because to create that world with no light, very tricky to do. The two tries to make a nice love story. Just take away the science fiction element, just have a story about this unlikely love affair would be nice. I think it'd be a lovely story, but I'd love to see any of them as films, but I wouldn't really, because they do something in their world, they make it all wrong. I like the idea.
Right, like you said earlier, you've got that Dark Eden world.
Yeah, it wouldn't be like that.
To try and see it.
Yeah, and the characters would be different, and everything would be very different. But I like the idea of it.
Yeah.
I'd like to. It would be kind of weird to see your own creation actually physically in front of you.
With the visual element of it and the sort of exploration, it would make a fantastic video game as well.
It would. I think somebody's inquired about that actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'll take him up on it. I'd love to play it.
Yeah, I think so.
That would be brilliant.
I think you get sometimes most of these things don't come to anything, but occasionally my agent says, "Oh, we've had an inquiry about this and that." Every one of those is, usually doesn't come to anything.
Hopefully James Cameron will be bored of Avatar soon.
Yeah.
Go back to the source of where he's had all his ideas.
Not after he ripped off my ideas.
Oh, yeah. Oh, right. Oh,
I enjoyed Avatar, but I thought the sequel was a bit...
I haven't seen them at all.
Pardon?
Second one I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I mean, visually it was nice, but the story was a bit rubbish, I thought. Yeah. But
Yeah. Does anyone else have any other questions at all? Or should we? Right, I think we've got to wrap up. We've got some books for sale over here, and we can take cash or card as well. And Chris is willing to sign the books as well.
Already.
But thank you very much. That was brilliant. Thank you so much for coming down.
Thank you so much for meeting everybody.
Thank you.